For 3 decades, Johnny Carson was America's late-night king. With his warm smile and quick wit, he brought Hollywood's biggest stars into our living rooms every night. To viewers, Carson seemed endlessly gracious, the perfect host who made every guest feel like an old friend. But when the cameras stopped rolling, the real Johnny sometimes had a much darker opinion. Behind the charm, Carson kept a private mental blacklist. Celebrities he considered not just difficult, but downright awful. Off camera, he spoke bluntly to friends about who was fake, cruel, or even dangerous. Over time, he revealed which beloved icons he secretly despised and why. Here are the 7 Golden Age stars Johnny Carson never wanted to see on his couch again. Joan Crawford, the Ice Queen. On screen, Joan Crawford was the very definition of old Hollywood glamour. When she appeared on The Tonight Show in 1970, audiences saw the perfect movie star, poised, polished, and endlessly gracious. But behind the scenes, Carson saw something entirely different. Crawford arrived with a list of demands that bordered on absurd: exact studio temperature, a specific chair angle, even lighting directions spanning 4 pages. She dismissed the show's makeup artists and brought her own team. And when a young assistant accidentally entered her dressing room, Crawford unleashed a verbal assault so vicious that staff froze in shock. She allegedly called the girl brainless and demanded she be fired. When the cameras rolled, Crawford transformed instantly, smiling and laughing on cue like a machine. During breaks, she sat in cold silence. Carson later quipped, "I've interviewed corpses with more personality." Years later, when Christina Crawford published Mommy Dearest, exposing her mother's alleged abuse, Johnny wasn't surprised. He had already seen through the mask. Frank Sinatra, the charming bully. Frank Sinatra was always ratings gold for Carson, but Johnny couldn't stand him. On air, Sinatra told stories, crooned, and charmed the audience. Backstage, he exuded raw intimidation. Sinatra arrived flanked by an entourage who looked more like mobsters than musicians. Staff described the atmosphere as being under surveillance. When a floor manager gave him a 3-minute warning, Sinatra allegedly grabbed the man by the tie and snarled, "I'll go on when I'm ready." Carson, watching from his office monitor, nearly pulled the plug on the entire segment. Johnny respected Sinatra's talent, but not his bullying. After one appearance where Sinatra insulted a female staff member, Carson snapped back, "We don't talk about my staff that way here." Afterward, he limited Sinatra's appearances to once a year. A shocking move for someone so famous and proof of how deeply Carson disliked him. Orson Welles, the genius who took over. Orson Welles was one of cinema's greatest minds, but for Carson, he was also one of the hardest guests to handle. Welles refused to follow the Tonight Show format. He tore up the writers' suggested questions, dismissed them as pedestrian, and launched into long-winded monologues that blew past time limits. One 7-minute slot stretched into 25, forcing producers to cut other guests entirely. Welles even tried to direct the show himself, standing up to tell camera operators which angles to use. Carson privately respected Welles's brilliance, but loathed his arrogance. After one particularly difficult show, he told Ed McMahon, "Genius doesn't excuse everything. Being brilliant doesn't give you the right to hijack someone else's show." Bette Davis, Hollywood's verbal assassin. Audiences adored Bette Davis on Carson's couch. She was sharp, funny, and endlessly entertaining. But Carson got the brunt of her acid tongue when the cameras weren't rolling. Davis frequently interrupted younger or female guests, sometimes turning her back on them entirely. Offstage, she berated staff, demanded whiskey before every taping, and reportedly used racist and sexist language. Carson usually avoided confrontation, but Davis pushed him to act. When she publicly humiliated a cue card holder, Johnny quietly told her, "On this show we speak to everyone with respect, or we don't speak at all." Davis, stunned, backed down. After her final appearance, Carson swore she'd never be invited back. Mickey Rooney, the fallen child star. Mickey Rooney Once America's favorite child actor had become a liability by the time he appeared on Carson's show. Instead of nostalgic charm, Rooney brought chaos, alcohol, and inappropriate behavior. According to staff, he developed a reputation for grabbing young assistants' hands, pulling them close, and making suggestive comments. Several requested reassignment when Rooney was booked. Carson himself once had to personally apologize to a young actress after Rooney made repeated crude remarks on air. Rooney often showed up drunk, slurring words and veering off topic. During one appearance, he launched into a story about Judy Garland so inappropriate that Carson had to cut him off mid-sentence. Afterward, Johnny sighed to his producer. Is he drunk, or is this just who he is now? Rooney's appearances became rare, and Carson eventually insisted he only be booked for pre-taped segments to limit the damage. Jane Russell, beauty with a bitter edge. Jane Russell was one of Hollywood's most glamorous stars of the 1940s and 50s, but Carson quickly soured on her appearances. The reason? Her outspoken political and social views, especially her treatment of LGBTQ+ staff. According to crew accounts, Russell once refused to let a gay makeup artist touch her, demanding someone else. Even more shocking, she reportedly refused to appear on the same episode as Rock Hudson, making derogatory comments about his sexuality. Carson, who prided himself on running a respectful professional set, was disgusted. Her final straw came when Russell was overheard making dismissive remarks about civil rights legislation during a commercial break. After that, Carson personally ensured she was never booked again. Jerry Lewis, truly hateful. Of all the celebrities Carson disliked, Jerry Lewis may have topped the list. To the public, Lewis was a beloved comedian and humanitarian, famous for his charity telethons. But Carson saw another side, arrogant, demeaning, and cruel. Lewis interrupted guests, talked over Carson, and even once reached across to adjust Johnny's tie as a dominance move. He refused to learn staff names, calling them camera guy or makeup girl. In one incident, he screamed at a cameraman for breathing too loudly during rehearsal. The hypocrisy infuriated Carson. Lewis would cry on national TV for sick children, then turn around and berate crew members like dirt. After his final appearance in the early 1980s, Johnny told his producer, "Never again." Years later, he summed it up harshly. In a town full of phonies, Jerry Lewis stands out as truly hateful. Carson's private disdain for these stars offers a rare glimpse behind Hollywood's golden curtain. He didn't blacklist people for being quirky or nervous. He could handle that. What he couldn't stand was cruelty, especially toward staff, assistants, and anyone without power. As one longtime producer put it, Johnny had a simple test. How did they treat the pages, the assistants, the guys running the cameras? That told him everything about who they really were. Looking back, many of Carson's judgments have since been validated. Christina Crawford's book exposed Joan's abuse. Sinatra's mob ties became well documented. Rooney's misconduct drew more attention, and Lewis's ego became legendary. Carson's blacklist is more than Hollywood gossip. It's a reminder that fame often hides deeply flawed, sometimes dangerous personalities. The smiles, the laughs, the glamour, they were often just another performance. Or as Johnny himself once said, the camera doesn't just add 10 pounds. It adds a layer of fiction. If you enjoyed this dive into Carson's blacklist, subscribe for more untold Hollywood scandals.